Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about pastel papers. Recently a friend of mine was trying to do a technique that I use in my pastel painting. When I do an underpainting, I paint my pastel on and then I use 91% rubbing alcohol to paint the pastels, and they kind of turn into watercolor basically. But the alcohol dries very quickly so you don't get any warping of the paper. Well, she tried it on the pastel paper that she had used, and it was a mess, she said. And it's because she used a different type of pastel paper than I use. Normally, I use a sanded pastel paper. It's called UArt pastel paper. I buy it online. You're not going to find it in the stores. And it comes in different grits. I think it starts at 240, then it goes to 280, 320, 400, 500, 600, maybe 800, and then 880. I'm not sure. But anyway, this one is a 500 grit. As you can see, it's written on the back, which is really helpful when I buy my paper because sometimes I buy it in different grits. This is 12 by 18, and it's a sandpaper. You can hear the grit on here. It's just like the sandpaper you'd buy in a hardware store, except that it's archival quality, so it's not going to degrade over time, and it's very even. Now this UArt paper that I have, these 9 by 12s, some of them are 400 grit. This is a 12 by 18 sheet that I cut in half. I must be out of my 400 grit. But when I'm doing finer work, is that a word, finer? I don't know. When I do work that is more fine, like when I draw pets or paint pets, I'll show you what I'm working on right now. I've been finding it a little bit difficult when I'm working with the 500 grit paper, and the reason for that is that it's still somewhat rough, and when I'm trying to paint fur on with pastel pencil, it disappears. The lines get a little too wide and things start to blur together. And this is an issue that I'm having with this one. Now the dog has short fur, so what I did was flat hand pastel. This is unfinished too, I'm sorry. I flat handed pastel in certain areas in order to give the illusion of highlights on his brown fur. And as you can see, I'm not finished. My leg is unfinished here. The face is unfinished. Then I started to work a little bit on the cat. And the cat has long fur. And as I was using the pencil, I noticed that the fur lines are just disappearing. I don't know if I can get this in here so that you can see. You can see a little bit of the lines. I was just starting on it, and I stopped because I got frustrated and I didn't want to lose it, ruin it. But anyway, you can see the difference from the dog's fur, the short fur, to the cat's fur. So that's part of the reason for different grits of sandpaper. Another reason that we use different grits of sanded pastel paper is for personal reasons. Some people tend to be more heavy-handed. When I first started in pastel, I was a very heavy-handed with my pastels. I didn't put them on lightly enough, and that's been a problem of mine since I started painting. It's something that I work on constantly. When I write, I press hard. I'm a lefty. I don't know if that has something to do with it, but anyway, I started with 400 grit paper because the tooth is deeper. They call it tooth. That's the grittiness of the paper, or the waviness of the paper. It was a 400 grit so that I could get more layers of my heavy-handed pastel in before I ran out of tooth. Then as I got a little bit better with it, I decided to go with 500 paper. The reason I changed was because when I use a heavier grit of sandpaper, or a lower number, you're using your pastels up faster because it's chewing up your chalk, you know. I hate to say chalk. It's really not chalk. Pastels are made with clay, not chalk. Anyway, so now I'm thinking for pets, I want to go closer to an 800 grit paper or maybe go to a suede mat board and just use colored pencil. I'm not sure. I haven't really decided. And I have another painting coming up that I need to finish. But I always work on a board like this. This is just an MDF board I got. Actually, it was the back of a, it was, I think I got it at a local art store when I first started painting. And I bought one of the pieces for framing. It was the part that sticks on the back. It just happened to be MDF. So now that's my favorite paper. I will always use sanded paper. I love sanded paper. Another form of sanded paper is something called Art Spectrum paper. And when I first started, I bought some Art Spectrum paper, and you can buy it like through Blix and something like that. And they, you know, an art store, or maybe even on Amazon. And you can get rainbow packs, warm colors or cool colors. And this, I believe I had a mix of warm and cool. I bought 2 packs, but here's some of the colors. So they come pre-colored. These last ones are white. There's a beige and then a white and then a green. And I have, these are the only ones I have left. The reason for that is they're also sanded, but they're probably closer to, I don't know, closer to an 800 grit, I would think. I'm not sure on that. Don't quote me on it. But anyway, I might use these for animal paintings and see if it helps at all. Then there's also something that you can buy in local craft stores, like at your Michael's, Hobby Lobby, maybe Joann's. And there's one made by Canson. It's called, I think they say Mi Tints. I call it Mi Tientes because it looks Spanish, so that's how I pronounce it. It's M-I and then T-I-E-N-T-E-S. It's made by Canson, and it is pastel paper, and it'll come in different colors. I don't have a full pack of it. I don't know what happened to it, so I'll show you a couple of the paintings I did. Now, you saw how smooth my dog was. You don't see any of the sandpaper through the pastel, right? Well, on something like Canson's Mi Tintes paper, it has a tooth on it, and most people that use this paper will flip it over and use the back side of the paper that has the reverse tooth, so it's not as deep in its hills and valleys. But this was a pastel that I did when I first bought my Prismacolor new pastels, and this was the picture on the front of the box of my pastels. So I'm going to pull this in close so that you can see the grain. See how that shows through? That's the tooth of the paper. There's no sand. It's almost like a watercolor paper, but it's much thinner. You cannot do a wet underpainting on this style of paper, and this is the type of paper my girlfriend had the problem with. It just absorbs it. It sucks it right up, and you're going to have waves everywhere. Here's another example on a lighter piece of paper that I did. This is a long time ago. Excuse my poor skills there, but you can see again all of these bumps in here. Had I used the back, and it's a mess, I'm sorry. I don't know if you can see in the back. Try to get some light on it. But there you can see it a little bit of valleying going on. And that is why people use the back of the paper. This paper is a paper made by Strathmore, and I'm sorry I couldn't find my book again. Now this paper is along the same lines as the Canson's Mi Tints paper. This is Strathmore pastel paper, and they have the same hills and valleys. This is the back side of the paper, I believe. No, this might be the front. And you can kind of see the tooth of the paper there. And then this is the back, where you lose most of it, but you get some valleying. You cannot put as many layers on this type of paper. It might be good to practice on when you're first getting going, though, because it's less expensive. For 10 pieces of 12 by 18 paper, it costs me, of UArt, sanded paper, regardless of the grit. It costs about $40 just for 10 sheets. You can buy a full pack of this type of paper from Kanson's. Oh, I don't know. I think there might be 20 sheets. And I can't remember the price, but I believe it's under $20. So you get a lot more bang for your buck there. It's about the thickness of a little less thick than a construction paper, but thicker than sketch pad. That makes sense. If I had to guess this, I would say it's probably at about a 65-pound paper. Then there's something else that I love and I have yet to use. Well, I've tried it, but I'm not using these yet. I was saving them for something special. These are 8x10, what they call pastel boards. They're archival safe. This is made by Ampersand. Got it upside down. So that's pastel board. Then the last thing I was going to show you was something else that I've done. I go to the local hardware store and I buy hardwood paneling, press paneling. It's probably MDF or whatever. It's got this shininess to the front of it. And this is what the back looks like. And it's a hardboard. I buy these, I think they come in 8x10-foot sheets. And the people hate me when I do this, but I go in and I have them cut them in different sizes. These are all 9x12s. I have 12x18s. So what I thought was I would save a lot of money on pastel paper by making my own pastel ground medium. You can buy it, and it's not real cheap. Well, I'm trying to think of what I was calling that other paper now. I've just lost my mind. This stuff. They make a pastel ground in different colors that you can buy. And then you can also buy it from Golden. This is a mess. And it's acrylic ground for pastel. When I was trying to do it on these boards, which is what I did here, I made my own. I used white gesso and I used pumice powder. And I made my own gritty paper board, which is great, except you can see here all the brush marks that I get in the paper. That is a very deep tooth for a pastel. So I get all these lines in my pastel work, which I don't want. So I'm still trying to figure out how to get this done. The best I've been able to do, and I've been practicing it on mixed media paper, is mixing my ground, and then I use the paintbrush, a smooth paintbrush, like one of these paintbrushes that leaves a very fine brush mark. I brush it on with that, and then afterward I go over it with a spray bottle of water, and then I do that again, and I spray it again, and hopefully the water kind of evens everything out. But I leave the water on top, and then as it dries a little bit smoother. But I still haven't been totally happy with it, so that's why I've stopped, and I went back to the UART paper, which is tough. It was really tough when I was just starting out, and I was ruining a lot of paintings because I didn't have that kind of money to be spending on practice. So anyway, I could recommend you start with a paper like this, the Kanson's Mi-Tints paper. You can do that, but you are going to get the graininess to it like this, which is kind of pretty. In fact, you can see here I left the orange showing through in a lot of areas, which was perfect for terracotta pot. I had to use a lot less pastel. So anyway, that's pastel paper. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments section down below. And my next video, I will go over the pastels in a little more detail for you. Have a great day, everyone.